Hi, this is the AI Storyteller. I'm Mark. The book you are interpreting in this issue is the classic literary masterpiece The Red and the Black. The Red and the Black is a novel written by French author Stendhal in the 19th century. When it was initially published in France, it received a lukewarm response, not because the book was bad, but because its sharp and realistic style left the public unsure of how to react. In a letter to Stendhal, the author of Carmen, Prosper Mérimée, wrote, "Your sin is exposing the wounds of the human heart for all to see, making it unbearable to look at." However, half a century later, such sharpness garnered the attention of a major reader, the German philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche. Nietzsche declared that Stendhal was one of the most beautiful encounters of his life and referred to him as the last great psychologist in France. It wasn't until the 20th century that the classic status of The Red and the Black was firmly established. For a work to be worthy of the title classic, it must withstand the test of time in terms of writing style, themes, and provide a sense of timelessness. The Red and the Black is a good example of this. Firstly, the novel reveals the relationship between individuals and society, which still offers significant space for deep contemplation today. Secondly, Stendhal abandoned the flattened portrayal of women found in medieval European literature, and endowed them with intelligence and subjective agency, which earned praise from Simone de Beauvoir. Furthermore, the author successfully shaped the protagonist Julien Sorel into a character who is both virtuous and villainous, almost becoming synonymous with ambition and unscrupulous means. So, is Julien Sorel simply an ambitious person and a complete antagonist? Not exactly. Julien Sorel is a complex mix of good and evil, and Stendhal, the master of psychological description, meticulously captures his convoluted inner journey, presenting a vivid and authentic portrayal of a person. Stendhal also imbues Julian with a characteristic that more or less strikes a chord with every reader: the vibrant vitality of aspiration. Julian, a young man from the lower class of society, is unwilling to repeat the life cycle of his ancestors. He strives to break through the barriers of French society and create a path of upward mobility through his own efforts. If Julian is guilty of anything, it is the so-called ambition beyond one's station, as he covets certain rights that do not naturally belong to his social class. The character of Julien Sorel and Stendhal's personal experiences naturally have some connection. Stendhal was born in 1783, and 6 years later, the French Revolution broke out. One could say that Stendhal's childhood and youth were imbued with revolutionary fervor, experiencing significant historical events such as the storming of the Bastille, the establishment of the French Republic, and Napoleon's coup d'état of the 18th Brumaire. On the second day of the coup, Stendhal arrived in Paris, originally intending to take the entrance exam for the Paris Polytechnic School. However, amidst the waves of revolution, Stendhal decisively abandoned his prospects as a science student and, through a cousin's introduction, secured a position as a secretary in the Ministry of War. Don't assume that Stendhal was a bookish and weak individual. He accompanied Napoleon on the Italian campaign and witnessed the disastrous retreat of the Moscow Expeditionary Force. Although Stendhal was born into a royalist family, his personal sentiments leaned towards Napoleon, and he even contemplated assassinating Louis XVIII. The Red and the Black also has a subtitle, Chronicle of 1830. This matter is quite interesting. When you open The Red and the Black, you will find a section titled Publisher's Note to the Reader before the main text. In this note, Stendhal deliberately states that the manuscript was written in 1827. However, based on historical records, it is speculated that he actually wrote The Red and the Black between 1829 and 1830, not in 1827. So why did he want to confuse the timeline? The reason lies in a significant historical event that took place 4 months before the publication of the book, in July 1830, the July Revolution. In 1815, Napoleon abdicated, and the Bourbon dynasty was restored, reinstating the privileges of the nobility and the church. Dissatisfaction among the people grew under the conservative rule of Charles X, leading to a revolution. Eventually, Louis Philippe of the House of Orleans ascended the throne, projecting an image of enlightened reform. Why did this revolution prompt Stendhal to falsify the writing time? It can be seen as a clever trick played by the author. As a writer, one always wants to appear insightful and have a broader perspective. Stendhal wanted to make people believe that as early as 1827, he had foreseen the conflicts between different classes in France and captured the dissatisfaction and resistance of the lower classes. Perhaps Stendhal felt that if he honestly admitted that he had completed the work on the eve or during the Revolution, the novel's impact would be weakened. The story of the Red and the Black takes place in Verrières, a fictional third-tier town permeated with the stench of petty materialism. The residents of this small town, including their mayor, are limited in intelligence and have narrow horizons. They often display a sense of self-satisfaction and smugness. The upper middle class of Verrières is composed of the church, the nobility, and businessmen, while the lower class includes the petite bourgeoisie, commoners, and farmers, forming a hierarchy of contempt. The mayor, who has noble blood, looks down on Mr. Vailnaud, the parvenu. The story begins with Vailnaud spending a large sum of money to buy 2 good horses, and the mayor is determined to outshine him. As a result, he has a clever idea and invites Julien Sorel, one of the few intellectuals in the town, to become the tutor for his son. Julian is intelligent and has an exceptional knowledge of the Bible, which impresses the townspeople as if he were the top scorer on the college entrance examination. The mayor believes that having a private tutor at home is a mark of aristocratic style, far surpassing the 2 horses of the parvenu. The novel is divided into 2 volumes. The first volume focuses on the story in the small town of Verrières, while the second volume shifts the stage to the political center of France, Paris. The main theme of the novel can be simply described as the protagonist's struggle to reach the pinnacle of life and achieve success in both love and career. However, the path to advancement is not easy. In the highly hierarchical and socially immobile society of France, hereditary status is particularly pronounced. Julian's father considers him a lazy person who doesn't do his duty in the family workshop and only reads useless books. On the other hand, the mayor not only hires Julian as a private tutor but also plans the future of his 3 sons. The eldest will become a soldier, the second will become a judge, and the third will become a priest. This means they will have control over the military, the judiciary, and the religious systems. In 19th century France, the upper class not only held economic, cultural, and political capital but also formed interconnected interest groups. They wouldn't allow newcomers to enter recklessly, as this would undermine their inherent advantages. If he were born in the era of Napoleon, the innkeeper's son could have become a general and achieved great success by the age of 30 through military accomplishments. That was also Julien Sorel's initial goal, to join the military. He admired Napoleon, not God, and his favorite book was not the Bible but the Memoirs of Saint Helena, which documented Napoleon's exile. However, when he was 14 years old and witnessed the magnificent construction of a grand church in Verrières, he realized that times had changed. He stopped talking about Napoleon, declared his intention to become a priest, and even determinedly memorized the entire New Testament in Latin. Did Julian truly have a single-minded desire to climb the social ladder? He hesitated. In his striving for upward mobility, he faced various temptations that could have kept him in his comfort zone. When Julian became a private tutor in the mayor's household, he had already experienced a social advancement, no longer needing to engage in physical labor, and earning a respectable income through intellectual work. The maid who served the mayor's wife even developed feelings for Julian and proposed marriage to him after receiving a small inheritance. However, Julian declined. A close friend invited him to become a business partner, promising to earn thousands of francs annually without having to deal with the aristocracy. Once again, Julian refused. From these instances, it can be seen that Julian's desire to become a higher-class individual was not solely motivated by money. Money, at least, was not his primary goal. He valued social status, honor, and respect. A small detail when Julian received the invitation to become a private tutor was that his father offered him a salary, but Julian was more concerned about whether he would have to dine at the same table as the servants. Sitting at the same table as the servants meant that his status would be equal to that of a servant, and no matter how much money he was given, he would not be pleased. Julian rejected the maid's declaration of love but fell in love with the mayor's wife, just as the impoverished Napoleon once fell in love with the noblewoman Josephine. Before the arrival of the young private tutor, the mayor's wife was following the typical trajectory of an aristocratic woman's life. She spent her girlhood in a convent, married a suitable husband with a substantial fortune, and bore 3 children. Aside from taking care of her children, the remaining time could only be filled with religion. The mayor's wife had little life experience, but she wasn't a wooden beauty. On the contrary, she had a flexible mind and a generous heart, traits that attracted Julian. Perhaps there was also a touch of perfect motherhood in her character. Of course, it cannot be denied that Julian hoped to leverage the influence of the mayor's wife to find a shortcut to success and harbored a self-satisfied sense of achievement that comes with conquering a noblewoman. On the other hand, the mayor's wife, despite being blessed with wealth, was surrounded by crude individuals, including her husband. Julian, however, was different. He was intelligent, sensitive, and confident, with a slightly effeminate personality that easily aroused maternal affection. Both of them lacked romantic experience. One relied solely on a surge of energy, while the other, although already a mother, had a somewhat girlish mindset. Julian constantly pushed himself to accomplish small feats, such as ensuring that he touched the mayor's wife's arm tonight, which he considered his duty. The mayor's wife, on the other hand, became jealous because Julian was hiding a bust of a woman and then smiled again when Julian swore it wasn't a picture of a woman. Between their playful interactions, the most vivid and dramatic scene in the first part of The Red and the Black unfolds when the king visits Verrières. The influential figures in the city were stirred by the news and all wanted to participate in this grand event, so that they could boast about it in the future and bring honor to their families. The mayor's wife, like a foolish girl driven by love, used all her means to eliminate the wealthy young men and secure a place for Julian in the procession just to catch a glimpse of her lover in military attire. However, this act angered the others, as the son of a carpenter was suddenly on the same level as noble-born youths. For Julian, an even greater shock came from the young bishop who presided over the pilgrimage ceremony. The bishop was only 6 or 7 years older than him, but became a bishop at such a young age because he was a nobleman and the nephew of a duke. The incident with the procession enraged the public, and the mayor received an anonymous letter accusing his wife of adultery with the private tutor. Julian left the small town and went to study at the seminary in Besançon. This episode at the seminary is like the rising action and turning point of a play. Our protagonist finally left the small town of Verrières and, through a recommendation, became the secretary of the Marquis. In Julian's own words, he would finally make an appearance on the grand stage of a great event. Upon his arrival at the Marquis's estate, Julian unexpectedly discovered that he was treated with great warmth by the Marquis, unlike the condescending and arrogant behavior of the small-town mayor. The Marquis and Julian's relationship seemed both mentor-like and friendly, but it did not mean that they were equals. The Marquis was simply a more enlightened nobleman who would not harm the employee's self-esteem because it served him no benefit. Under the graciousness of his superior, the Marquis's attitude towards Julian was quite contradictory. He admired the young man's talent but deeply looked down upon his background. The highest praise Parisian elites bestowed upon Julian was by considering him the illegitimate child of some great aristocrat, rather than the son of a carpenter. They couldn't believe that such an outstanding young man came from the lower class, so they preferred to deceive themselves with the excuse of him being an illegitimate child. While at the Marquis's estate, Julian also encountered an anomaly, the Marquis's daughter, Mathilde. Perhaps some may recall that Sartre had a failed love affair with a woman named Mathilde, who was also a heroine. Whether there is a connection between the two remains unknown. Simone de Beauvoir dedicated a considerable portion of her book The Second Sex to discussing Sartre, and she highly praised his perspective on women, considering him far more progressive than other contemporary writers. Sartre's female characters were flesh and blood, rather than stereotypical and formulaic. Although Sartre always made the male protagonist fall in love with a more traditionally virtuous woman, such as the mayor's wife, he still provided Julian with another contrasting girlfriend, Mathilde, who defied conventions, in The Red and the Black. Mathilde left readers bewildered at the time. Therefore, for Beauvoir, Sartre's breakthrough was already remarkable in her eyes. So how exactly did Mathilde defy conventions? In modern terms, this woman is a living drama. When she first appeared, she dressed herself in mourning attire and claimed it was to mourn her ancestors. One of the Marquis's ancestors was executed during court intrigue, and Queen Marguerite, who was involved with this ancestor, requested the lover's head and gave it a proper burial. Mathilde greatly admired the Queen's act and, in the end, even emulated it herself by personally burying Julian's severed head. Mathilde looked down upon mediocre noble-born youths whose privileges were inherited by birthright. Julian, on the other hand, was different. His presence in the Marquis's estate was solely due to his personal efforts and struggle. Essentially, Julian and Mathilde belong to the same category of people. They have burning ambitions and desires, and they possess dramatic personalities. They are deeply influenced by various emerging ideologies of the time. In the event of a revolution, Julian would become the next revolutionary leader, and Mathilde would fight alongside him, or even die for him. However, at the same time, both of them are proud and arrogant. Julian worries that Mathilde looks down on him from a position of superiority, and Mathilde indeed considers marrying Julian as a step down in status. However, under the influence of romantic sentiments, she also finds falling in love with Julian an extraordinary and worthy endeavor. With all the complexities at play, their love is like a passionate tango, with one step forward and one step back. Julian gradually realizes that the tender and caring approach he used with the mayor's wife does not work with Mathilde. The more cool and domineering he acts, the more likely he is to conquer her. So, he has a brilliant idea and climbs up a ladder to enter Mathilde's room. This action is truly daring. What if Mathilde refuses to open the window? But Mathilde does open it, and Julian's dramatic gesture aligns perfectly with her desires. She even excitedly cuts off a lock of her hair to demonstrate that she is Julian's servant. When describing the emotional turmoil between Julian and Mathilde, Stendhal employs a substantial amount of internal monologue, which is why he is known as the master of psychological description. Stendhal innovatively abandons descriptive text and minimizes dialogue between characters, instead devoting much ink to expressing each character's thoughts and feelings. Julian and Mathilde's stormy inner drama accompanies Julian's climbing into Mathilde's boudoir and reaches its climax. However, just as the climax is about to arrive, Stendhal abruptly stops. Mathilde simply says, "It's you," and decisively puts an end to the intense emotional play between the two. This detail demonstrates Stendhal's mastery in innovating narrative rhythm. The thrill of an illicit affair became the fuel for their love. As the fire raged stronger and stronger, Mathilde became pregnant. The Marquis could only play the role of a benevolent father-in-law and, in order to make Julian worthy of his daughter, he bestowed upon Julian the rank of a lieutenant in the light cavalry and a noble title. Julian truly became the illegitimate child of some great aristocrat left behind in the mountains, to the point where he even doubted it himself at times. But Julian's moment at the peak of his life was short-lived as he plummeted into the mud. The Marquis received a letter from the mayor's wife, in which she confessed to her past affair with Julian. This letter of denunciation tarnished Julian's reputation, and he watched as the coveted fame and fortune slipped away from his grasp. In a moment of hot-headedness, Julian hastily returned to Verrières and publicly shot the mayor's wife inside the church. Subsequently, he was arrested and thrown into prison. There are many explanations that can plausibly justify this sudden turn of events. Naturally, the wife wrote the letter under pressure, as rising Phoenix men like Julian faced fierce resistance from the old powers, whether overt or covert. Of course, one could also argue that the wife's behavior was the revenge of a jilted woman in despair over her lover. Although this action contradicted her naive and kind personality portrayed throughout the entire book, it precisely illustrates Stendhal's profound understanding of human complexity. However, some critics believe that Stendhal's arrangement was somewhat contrived, even overly so. Julian had to be imprisoned, in order to fulfill this tragic outcome, enabling Stendhal to deliver Julian's resounding speech in court. Facing a jury entirely composed of the bourgeoisie, Julian declared. He was born shorter than the noble gentleman present, he was nothing more than a lowly peasant, yet he dared to resist his fate. He was certainly guilty, for he had harmed the noble and kind mayor's wife, and even more so for infiltrating high society. He must die. The ruling class of France would undoubtedly condemn him to death. They would punish him to set an example, warning those audacious young individuals who dared to disrupt the social order. Otherwise, when the opportunity arose, talented but impoverished youths would become the next Napoleons, Dantons, or Robespierres. These destabilizing elements of society would snatch away the wealth, status, and power of the upper classes. In the end, Julian refused clemency, as he saw it as an act of the aristocracy's charity. Julian put an end to his own life through an act bordering on suicide. Mathilde personally buried her lover's severed head, fulfilling the fate of their ancestors. The mayor's wife, physically and emotionally wounded, died 3 days after Julian's execution. Her injuries were not fatal. Her ultimate death was almost a state of giving up treatment and seeking a quick demise. With Julian ascending the gallows, she had no attachment to this world. Looking back at Julian's short life, the carpenter's son diligently studied, becoming a tutor for the mayor's son, then securing a position as the Marquis' secretary due to his connections with the church. He captured the heart of Mathilde, a noblewoman several generations his senior, and entered the army he had long yearned for. In the blink of an eye, he lost everything in his life. However, for Julian, his soul underwent purification and elevation. Before his imprisonment, Julian was obsessed with worldly success, willing to die 1,000 times for wealth and power. But after his imprisonment, Julian received a rude awakening and finally understood the meaning of happiness, attaining inner tranquility. Thus, he could face death calmly because he no longer had any attachments in this life. As mentioned earlier, Stendhal had a particular fascination with the word happiness, and he often liked to quote a dedication, "To the few happy ones." This quote comes from a relatively unknown English novel called The Vicar of Wakefield. However, this book had a significant influence on British authors such as Jane Austen and Charles Dickens, and it served as Stendhal's extracurricular reading material for learning English. The vicar in The Vicar of Wakefield upholds truth and goodness, and his values and morality clash with the secular world because evil is inevitable in reality. Unlike The Red and the Black, The Vicar of Wakefield has a happy ending where good people receive their just rewards. Stendhal liked to quote this phrase perhaps because he believed that only a tiny minority of people remained true to themselves, and they alone could be considered truly happy. Stendhal's writing concepts were also a minority viewpoint in his era. The epigraph he wrote for the first volume was, "Truth, harsh truth." This indicated his position. He never classified himself as a romantic, and he did not write novels for the entertainment of ladies in their boudoirs. Instead, he recorded reality, society, and depicted the customs and intellectual trends of the 1830s, much like a ukiyo-e print. His style of realism inspired future writers such as Émile Zola and Edouard Louis. Louis described him as our great novelist who studied humanity, as if studying strange insects. He surpassed the pain and madness of his subjects, and was solely devoted to accomplishing his dissection task. However, as experienced readers, we can see through the author's sleight of hand and find elements that are not entirely realistic within Stendhal's realistic style. At least, Stendhal's own romanticism and heroism often emerge between the lines when designing the logic of Julian and Mathilde's actions. It could be said that Stendhal's realism and romanticism are two sides of the same coin, magically interwoven in The Red and the Black, mutually opposing yet inseparable, ultimately forming its unique charm. Furthermore, Stendhal's nuanced psychological portrayals also influenced F. Scott Fitzgerald and Virginia Woolf, laying the foundation for modern psychological novels. Another contribution Stendhal made to literary development is his construction of reasonable motives and logic for falling in love. In medieval literature, brave knights would blindly fall in love with noble ladies simply because of their nobility and beauty. As mentioned earlier, in On Love, Stendhal treated love as a subject of scientific research and divided it into 7 stages: admiration, delight, hope, love taking root, first crystallization, doubt, and second crystallization. From this, we can see that Stendhal defined love as requiring interaction between both men and women. He expanded the boundaries of female allure, where the innocent and pure mayor's wife represented one kind of beauty, while the rebellious and unconventional Mathilde represented another. Lily of the valley and thorny roses, each with their own preferences. In the end, we need to return to the central character of The Red and the Black, Julien Sorel. The most captivating aspect of Julian's personality is his sense of rebellion. He is acutely aware of his own talents, and sees through the mediocrity of French high society. French Goncourt Prize winner André Gide considered The Red and the Black a rebellion of intellect and emotions. It can be said that Julian actively rebels against post-Restoration French society. He uses his wit to escape from the physical labor of a carpenter, and eventually becomes the trusted secretary of a marquis. He refuses to settle for a mundane life married to a servant, and conquers two women who hold much higher social status than him. However, Julian's tragic fate is almost predetermined. It is influenced by external factors of the time and his own character flaws. He becomes excessively obsessed with secular success, and loses sight of his inherent goodness. From a legal perspective, his actions do break the law, and it is only logical for him to confess and face the consequences. In fact, within the numerous details of the novel, we can see various elements of dramatics hidden within Julian's personality. He may appear cunning and manipulative at times, such as when he feigns pursuit of a noblewoman to provoke Mathilde and successfully traps her emotionally. However, ultimately, he is a reckless and naive young man. He praises Napoleon in front of the Royalist Party members on more than one occasion. The final gunshot that wounds the mayor's wife is entirely unnecessary from a utilitarian perspective, causing him to lose the wealth and glory that was within his grasp. Regarding Julian as a character, the viewpoint of the renowned British critic James Wood is highly accurate. Julian adopts self-interest as his creed, but in reality, he cannot live according to this creed. He is not as capable as he believes in deciphering the hidden codes of the upper class. He is proudly hypocritical, but not consistently hypocritical. Genuine hypocrisy conceals itself flawlessly, and he never achieves that level of maturity. Yet, it is precisely this contradiction that makes Julian the most captivating. In Wood's words, this is Stendhal's great innovation. While contemporary and subsequent writers have created characters who strive to climb the social ladder, no character has truly surpassed Julian in terms of depth and the sense of identification and empathy from a wide range of readers. The heroic sentiment in Julian's character is full of dramatic tension, prompting adaptations of The Red and the Black into television dramas, films, and stage plays time and time again. There is an intriguing phenomenon where in the novel, Julian is described as merely attractive, but every actor who portrays Julian on screen is exceptionally handsome. Directors seem to be fond of this character and have a tendency to idealize him. This can be attributed to Stendhal's skill in character development. He has left an enduring and timeless image of a character attempting to defy fate, which is the most significant reason why The Red and the Black continues to captivate readers. Here is a summary of the key points in the book. 1. The lower-class people in order to achieve social advancement had two paths, military and the church. However, after the fall of Napoleon, the military path became inaccessible, so Julien Sorel had no choice but to join the church. This reflects the social reality of France at the time, where the church held significant influence in various domains. Becoming a member of the church was the only way to secure a future. 2. The Red and the Black accurately depicts the drastic changes in French society during the 1830s. The rise of the bourgeoisie led to increased demands for rights, while the lower-class people were discontented with the social rigidity. The sharp class contradictions eventually culminated in the July Revolution, pushing France further towards the goal of class equality. 3. The classic nature of The Red and the Black lies in several aspects. Firstly, the novel precisely addresses the social issues of the time, which still hold relevance and provide insights today. Secondly, Stendhal enriches the characters of women, challenging the prevailing biases against women in the 19th century. Lastly, Stendhal creates a complex and morally ambiguous protagonist in Julien Sorel, allowing future generations of creators to adapt the novel into television, film, and stage productions. 4. In terms of literary significance and narrative techniques, Stendhal is widely regarded as a pivotal figure. Stendhal's realistic style in The Red and the Black influenced later writers like Émile Zola and Gustave Flaubert, while his nuanced psychological portrayals paved the way for authors such as F. Scott Fitzgerald and Virginia Woolf, establishing the foundation of modern psychological novels. Simultaneously, Stendhal's realistic style intertwines seamlessly with his romantic sensibility, creating a unique and captivating charm that is distinctly his own. Well, that concludes the content for this episode. If you enjoyed my video, please click like, subscribe to my channel, and share it with your friends. Thank you.